This is one of America's allies in Southeast Asia. This young man is 11 years old. He carries an M16 rifle. He tells me he's used it 4 times already in combat against the North Vietnamese. This year's biggest battle in Indochina is raging not in Vietnam, but here in the mountains of Laos. It pits North Vietnamese regulars against a secret irregular army, organized, advised, supported, and paid by the Central Intelligence Agency. The key to the battle is a high ridgeline. This is the famous Skyline Ridge, the keystone of the defensive position at Long Chen. We're getting mortar fire in here right now from the North Vietnamese divisions which surround this place, which is why everybody is staying so low. In the past few minutes, we've had mortar rounds land within 15 yards of here.
I know it, we're damn close. Well, you've been getting 2 rounds, 3 rounds every 10, 15 minutes.
How many kids do they get?
Though many of its recruits are under 16, the secret army has been the toughest force opposing the communists in Laos. Now the North Vietnamese are making an all-out effort to destroy it. This week, there is still heavy fighting around Long Cheng. The secret army now has men from various ethnic groups, but it began among the Mao hill tribes. The Mao, or Hmong as they call themselves, are a fiercely independent people who thrive in the rugged highlands. Today, most are refugees, clinging to those patches of the mountains still under government control. Despite 10 years of defeat and suffering, most have remained staunch allies of America. Today, with other hill tribes, they are still the backbone of the secret army and make it the closest thing to a people's army on the government side. They have paid dearly for their commitment. Their camps are built of the debris of war. They move constantly, shifting locations as the war sweeps back and forth across their mountains. At each new spot, they dig in to await the next attack. When there's time between moves, they still plant their opium poppies. For centuries, opium was their only cash crop. But the war has reduced the crops to the point where the Hmong smoke most of it themselves. This is Boom Long, 45 miles from the North Vietnamese border and the only major secret army base left in the far north. To get here means a long flight over enemy territory with the pilots dodging anti-aircraft positions. The only link with the outside world is the airstrip, and it is frequently closed by enemy shell fire. There are 6,000 people here. Only a few hundred are soldiers advised by the CIA. The rest are women and children. Boom Long is called the fortress in the sky, and it's a fortress under siege. The people spend most of their time repairing the damage from the last enemy attack and digging deeper for the next one. The local Hmong commander requires each family to dig and maintain its own bunker. Casualties have been high, including hundreds of civilians. Manpower is so scarce that some positions are guarded only by straw dummies. Because of its strategic location, the Hmong and their CIA advisors are determined to hold Boom Long as possible. That may not be much longer. Each year, the enemy assaults become heavier. The defenses are littered with the bones of North Vietnamese soldiers who have died here. This week, the secret army has been using these positions to attack enemy supply routes. The object, to relieve pressure on Long Chen. If Long Chen falls, Boom Long will almost certainly be next. For years, this compound in the village of Long Chen was one of the most secret spots on Earth.
This was headquarters for the CIA and the secret army in Laos. It was a little bit of America, crammed with sophisticated electronic gear. Journalists called it Spook Heaven. This year, Spook Heaven has become part of the front line. The CIA has moved to a new location. We talked to a CIA man assigned to the secret army. The agency calls him a case officer. He's a civilian, but in any other war, he'd be called a military advisor. Just what do you CIA men do up here?
Well, first of all, let me set the record straight that we do not command any of the combat troops. Our primary role is one of supporting the indigenous Lao forces in MR2. That support involves a number of things. Some of it is technical advice. A great deal of it is training. It involves advice. Well, our advice is one of keeping them informed on what is possible with the resources that are available.
What are we trying to accomplish up here?
Well, the primary aim of the United States government in Laos is to assist the people of Laos to have the kind of government that they want to have. Our job is not one of telling them how to run the war or of having the war become our war. Our task is one of working with them, training them, advising them, letting them make the decisions that they believe are in their national interest. And so far, we have been able to conduct this with very, very few Americans.
The man who commands most of the secret army is General Bang Pao. He is a Hmong tribesman who worked closely with the CIA in organizing the hill people. Today, along with his secret army role, he also commands all Lao forces in the most crucial military region. We found him helping his soldiers repair shell holes in the airstrip near his headquarters. He is definitely not an armchair general. He's part warlord, part tribal father figure, and the most effective military leader in Laos today. When the war permits, Bang Pao spends most of his time with other tribal leaders. The Hmong look to him for leadership in politics as well as fighting. But in the tribal hierarchy, Bang Pao is not a dictator, but a sort of first among equals. Decisions are reached only after the traditional long discussions with other clan chiefs. But Bang Pao's favorite spot is the front line. Some of his American CIA advisors complain that VP, as they call him, spends too much time in the foxholes and not enough time plotting grand strategy. But the fact is the soldiers, especially the Hmong soldiers, fight best when VP is around. And despite his advisors, Bang Pao is not about to change his style, even when his arrival attracts enemy mortar fire. Bang Pao likes nothing better than playing the role of an Oriental George Patton and personally directing counter-battery fire.
General, what have we got over in that position we're shooting at?
120 mortar.
A 120 mortar?
Yeah.
Well, that makes it interesting.
Yeah.
We're up on Skyline Ridge, which in terms of the war in Laos is likely to become a legend like Heartbreak Ridge in Korea or Hamburger Hill in Vietnam. These holes we're sitting in right now, up until about 48 hours ago, were occupied by one of the best North Vietnamese regiments there is. All these positions off to our front here are occupied by the North Vietnamese. The secret army was not designed to slug it out with North Vietnamese divisions. Their performance at Long Chen has surprised most experts. But the fighting there is heavier than ever, and no one knows how long they can keep it up. Casualties in this year's battles have been the heaviest ever. They are evacuated in American furnished planes and helicopters. Most of those who survive are treated in hospitals paid for and run by the American Agency for International Development. The dead are also flown out, wrapped in American body bags. The lightly wounded can expect to be back in the front lines quickly. They can also expect a visit from General Vang Pao, who tries to make sure they get the best care available. Frequently, he is accompanied by an aide-de-camp with a briefcase full of money. Vang Pao and his men received their money direct from the CIA, bypassing the corruption that plagues the Lao regular army. By Lao standards, they are very well paid. Critics have suggested that the rice and money from America are the secret army's main motivation.
No amount of money or rice or medical treatment is going to get any young man to stand up and fight the North Vietnamese and run the very high risk of being killed or maimed for life. Because remember, these are irregulars. They're very much like we had in the Revolutionary War in our own country. They volunteered in and they can volunteer out. The Hmong attitude is that this is his homeland. They're here and they're fighting because this is their homeland. They lose this and there's no place else for them to go.
But each year, the Hmong homeland shrinks. The battles are bigger, the casualty list longer. And there are signs of weariness among the hill tribes. Vang Pao spends a lot of time visiting the isolated Hmong settlements, trying to boost his people's morale. Except for the small local garrison, there are usually few men present. They are all away at the front. One of his unpleasant duties is to inform wives and mothers that their loved ones are dead or missing. This week, some units of the secret army refused to continue the fight at Long Chen. But they were not hill people. The Hmong are a tough and stoic race. And as long as Vang Pao is willing to lead, they seem willing to follow. To continue the fight, the secret army has to look beyond Laos for recruits. These soldiers are Thai volunteers, recruited and trained in Thailand by the CIA, which also pays them. The Lao, and particularly the hill tribes, have been bled white by the war. They have simply run out of manpower. The result is about 8,000 Thai volunteers presently fighting in Laos. Some senators claim this violates a congressional ban on mercenaries being hired to fight in Southeast Asia. Both the Lao and Thai governments are very touchy about the subject. The volunteers have taken heavy casualties in the recent fighting. Where are you from?
I'm from Bangkok.
This is a long way from Bangkok. How long have you been here?
1 year.
You've been here 1 year?
Yes.
You fight the North Vietnamese very much?
Yeah. I work here 1 year, but I think it's very long. It's same 10 years.
1 year here seems like 10 years. Do you like it here?
No, I no lie.
The entire northeastern region of Thailand has a population of about 18 million Lao. Therefore, these Lao, that is, these Thai of Lao descent, have a reason to defend Laos as well. This is readily understandable. It is not Thai regulars that we have now, but volunteers.
His Highness is satisfied that this does not infringe on Laos's position in the world as a neutralist country.
No problem. They are volunteers who come to fight, as was the case, as you know, in France, with the Foreign Legion, which includes individuals from all nationalities. So why not in our case?
Whatever the diplomatic niceties, the Thai volunteers are absolutely necessary. Without them, the secret army, and Laos too, would probably collapse. Even if that happens, Bang Pao says the Hmong will fight on.
Even if the North Vietnamese could take over all our territory, we will take to the jungle to carry on the fight against them, no matter how long it takes, 50 or even 100 years. We will keep on fighting until the North Vietnamese get out of our land.
These days, Bang Pao seldom sees his home or children. He has been through crises before, but this year, the military situation is worse than ever. He's troubled for the future of his children and his people. But he says he's confident that America will never simply abandon the Hill people. For the civilian charter pilots, the war begins at dawn, when the engines start turning at Vientiane Airport. Air America alone carries 12 million pounds of cargo and nearly 10,000 people out of Vientiane each month. Their destinations are diverse and often dangerous.
Well, now on the unfriendly activity, which was right off to the south, I don't see the same marks that were on the previous chart. But, no. But here again, it looks like perhaps we've lost that unfriendly activity. Yeah.
There are very few milk runs left in Laos. At pilot briefings, the latest reports on enemy anti-aircraft positions are as important as the weather.
Again, if you're low level, good chance you may pick up some unfriendly fire.
Pilots say the only thing worse than flying in Laos is trying to land there. By local standards, this dirt strip set between mountains is a major airport. It is now the Secret Army's headquarters in northern Laos. Big planes bring the cargo in, and from here, smaller planes and helicopters haul it to 100 different sites in the surrounding mountains. These days, much of the cargo is ammunition. Most of it parachuted to what the pilots call the friendlies. The control tower is primitive, and there are no navigation aids. Yet between daylight and dusk, this strip handles 900 takeoffs and landings each day. Some of the planes end up like this. As one pilot said, Air America is not exactly like flying for Pan American out of JFK. This was one of Air America's major operations centers until the enemy overran it. The combination of danger, superb flying, and exotic locale, plus a tradition of secrecy, has led to some highly sensational reporting about Air America. Its pilots have been called America's Flying Foreign Legion and the Lord Jims of Laos.
What is Air America?
Well, it's the same thing today that it always has been, and that is a charter air carrier whose major customer is the United States government. And it's nothing more or less than that. The average age, by the way, is 43 out here, so that they're not a bunch of apple-cheeked youngsters who are looking for big thrills. Most of them already have their thrills.
Each season, it gets worse. As an example, we're within 15 minutes now of an area. Last year was like a rest center. This year, as you know, we've already had one airplane shot down. What's the worst thing about flying out here? The mountains, the weather, or the bad guys? It's a combination of all three. We have three distinct flying seasons. It's either smoky, windy, or rainy. And any one of the three combined with the enemy creates the situation that none of us like.
So you don't really have a happy season?
There's not.
How long do you plan to keep this up?
Each year I say it's my last one. This is my 7th year now.
What is it that brings you back?
Money. No, not really. It's a big influence, of course. I have 2 daughters to put through school yet, out of my 6. So even though I'm retired, I still have to work.
You like the guys you work with?
Yeah, a real bunch of pros, every one of them.
We have an extreme sense of comradeship and a sense of competition that I think is not excelled in any profession.
Let's say the U.S. government put, let's say, 500,000 troops into North Vietnam to accomplish the same job that we're accomplishing here with a handful of, so to speak, American professionals.
We have a commodity to sell. We can't sell it any place in the world except right here.
And if you want to be, if you just want to be mundane and about it, take this war away, or if we quit, you talk about why we do it. If most of us went back to the United States, we would be a dirty old man.
Come on, Jim, you're a dirty old man here. What are you talking about?
Well, not really.
It is a different operation, I think, than you'll find any place in the world. But on the other hand, as far as professional standards go, we do meet the requirements of any major airline, regardless of where it is throughout the world.
It is becoming tougher, but it hasn't reached the point where we're giving up by any stretch of the imagination. All of us are very talented, very, very talented, and we can avoid what they have given us so far. But it is becoming a little more difficult for us to do.
We are really all...
If it's a normal day today in Vietnam, we and our allies will kill about 200 Viet Cong. In turn, they will kill or wound about 100 Americans, and we will spend over $48 million. And all this is just a part of our ground war in Asia against communist aggression.
Right over here at the right, we discovered 2 tunnels. And we're preparing to blow them very shortly.
There's dirt around the holes. We can see that they haven't been dug too long. So this means they're not too far away.
Today in the air war, if things are normal, we will drop bombs in nearly 800 airstrikes. About 100 of these airstrikes, however, are part of the semi-secret war in Laos. This bomb, for instance, will fall on communist infiltration routes through Laos to South Vietnam and Thailand. Like the bomb, the plane, the equipment, the rockets, the war itself is American-made, supported, supplied, or directed. These planes will be flown by American-trained Laotian pilots, part of the holding action we support in Laos while we try and defeat the same enemy in Vietnam. The ground war in Laos is a bloody mixture of old and new, of swift guerrilla raids and static trench warfare, where the same troops have occupied the same muddy holes for years, with the enemy dug in only a few hundred yards away. Despite 2 formal peace treaties, the guns really haven't stopped firing in 12 years, making this Asia's longest continuous shooting war. Its great significance is that it exemplifies all our past Asian policies, blunders, hesitations, and frustrations. And for those who believe negotiations and conferences are the solution to war in Asia, it has some somber lessons. Since 1953, tiny Laos has probably been negotiated over and conferred over more often and by more people than any spot on Earth. This is the result. The tragic war in landlocked and impoverished Laos is less an ideological battle than a problem of simple geography. For the communists to carry out their infiltration of Thailand and their war in South Vietnam, they need to travel through Laos. Battalions of North Vietnamese are dug in on the Plain of Jars, the traditional invasion route to the Mekong. Chinese engineer battalions are building roads towards the border of Thailand from China's Yunnan province. 50,000 North Vietnamese move supplies down the Ho Chi Minh Trail to South Vietnam. Communist supplies are moved from Cambodia to South Vietnam along the Sihanouk Trail. The fight to stop this aggression is part of the battle for Asia. Tonight, Laos, the forgotten war. Ted Yates, NBC News, reporting.
I want to make a brief statement about Laos. It is, I think, important for all Americans to understand this difficult and potentially dangerous problem. In the last half of 1960, a series of sudden maneuvers occurred, and the communists and their supporters turned to a new and greatly intensified military effort to take over.
Since this pronouncement by President Kennedy in 1961, over $300 million in U.S. arms have gone to Laos. But the country is still dominated by the communists, and the chaos in Laos, as it was then called, still goes on. The chaos, in fact, has increased. Here at the royal capital of Luang Prabang, in addition to its other problems, Laos has two capitals, is the king. He's been in the palace 6 years, but still refuses to be crowned because, as soothsayers report, the stars are not yet right for the event. About the only thing that brings the king to Vientiane, the administrative capital, are royal matters, in this case, the funeral of a royal prince. Shielded from the sun, the monarch leads the mourners. With him, royal princes, behind the feudal hierarchy of Laos. First, the Royal Officers Corps. They run the country, sometimes well, sometimes crookedly, invariably at odds with each other. The important Buddhist monks, and the representatives of 60 tribes that add the element of ethnic diversity to the country's political confusions. The funeral cortege passes Vientiane's greatest edifice. Begun as the Laotian Victory Monument, the project sits abandoned, probably because there has been no such thing as victory in Laos for anyone. It is now called, more appropriately, the Monument to the Dead. Most of its cement was stolen from U.S. aid. Royal funerals are one of the events that attract all of Vientiane's diplomatic corps, one of Asia's best stocked. Among the world's great fantasies is Laotian neutrality. But this myth enables all the enemy diplomats to mingle socially, including those fighting the hardest in Laos. Both North and South Vietnam attend a day's funeral. And bedecked in proletarian finery, the jaunty dean of the diplomatic corps, the communist Chinese ambassador. When I use a word, Humpty Dumpty said in Alice in Wonderland, it means just what I choose it to mean, neither more nor less. In the fantasy of Laos, the word neutrality is used much the same way. To some, neutrality means peace, or at least hope. To others, it is a word behind which armies are hidden, aggressions continued. And still to others, neutrality has come to mean what in fact it is in Laos: war, pain, fear. A relentless and brutal series of events that each year leads the entire kingdom of Laos on an elaborate and costly funeral march towards its own national grave, under the interested scrutiny of the world's diplomats. As the North Vietnamese ambassador listens to the funeral prayers just across town at the Royal Army camp, some of his countrymen are less honored. These prisoners are North Vietnamese soldiers captured in Laos, part of the 75,000 North Vietnamese who have invaded the country. About 2/3 of them operate the Ho Chi Minh Trail. The rest, including 15 regular battalions, do most of the fighting in Laos, and have ever since President Kennedy's announcement in 1961. Laos's own communist forces, called the Pathet Lao, number about 24,000. They are not the best soldiers, and without massive North Vietnamese intervention, they probably would not be much of a threat. And here we see Pathet Lao soldiers shopping in Vientiane's marketplace. Under the 1962 Geneva Agreements, the Pathet Lao became part of the legal coalition government. The communist leaders soon pulled out and resumed fighting. But Laos being what it is, the Pathet Lao are permitted to do their marketing in the same capital they are trying to conquer.
Among the numerous curiosities here in the capital of Laos is this building on my left. This is where the enemy lives, 100 of them, fully armed and uniformed. How do you do, ça va? Do you speak English? No parle English? Hey, laddie, are you a Pathet Lao soldier? What we're trying to do, you see, is show the American public, get a good look at the enemy. And I thought perhaps you would come out here and pose for our camera. Do you speak English, my friend? Do you speak any English? Parlez-vous anglais?
Oh, no.
No parlez?
No. Okay, monsieur.
I just wanted to take some pictures. Filmar el soldado, the soldier, for American television. Just let them see what the Pathet Lao soldier. The point that we're trying to make here is that this is the Pathet Lao. These are our enemies. And they have, in the last year, killed 14,000 Laotian soldiers and civilians. They've practically cut the country in half. They have, in addition to all that, right. They have turned the Ho Chi Minh Trail with the help of North Vietnamese regular soldiers into a boulevard, but nonetheless they enjoy the comparative security of these buildings. They do their shopping across the street in the morning over here in the marketplace. This just points up one of the many Alice in Wonderland aspects of this very peculiar war in Southeast Asia. Okay? What's wrong? Can't we? Do you speak English? Parlez français? Okay? No? What's wrong? What's wrong? What's the problem?
The problem, in a nutshell, is that Laos is all mixed up. It has communist, neutralist, and royalist armies, plus the Royal Air Force, which recently bombed Royal Army headquarters. It has a king who can't be crowned because of his fortune tellers. The neutralist army were once part of the Royal Army, then fought against it, but now fight the communists. The communists have their own neutralists, who fight the original neutralists. Laos is a confusion of political solutions that don't work, and guns that do. And it's producing a confused and cynical population of hungry people who, faced by these weird realities, do their utmost to escape from becoming involved. We escaped honorably, we thought, through the Geneva Peace Agreements of 1962. Laos was left theoretically neutral, governed by a coalition of neutralists, communists, and conservatives. But the three-headed government never had a chance. When the communists could not dominate it, they wrecked it. Theoretically, the war in Laos was settled at the conference table. But in fact, the war goes on, and Laos stands a monument to the failure of a negotiated peace. There hasn't been a successful coup d'etat in the capital of Vientiane in 3 years. This political feat has been accomplished by Prime Minister Prince Savanaphouma, whose task it's been to hold the remnants of Laos together and maintain its pretense of neutrality. Formerly a sincere neutralist, his disillusionment in the communists has finally found expression.
Altesse, would you evaluate the political and military situation in Laos and explain what will be needed, in your view, to restore peace and unity to the kingdom?
La situation politique et militaire au Laos.
The political and military situation in Laos comes from the disrespect for the 1962 Geneva Convention by certain signers. Indeed, the 1962 Geneva Accord prescribed that foreign troops had to withdraw from Laos. On the other hand, an article of the accord specified distinctly that no signatory power could use the territory of Laos to attack their neighbor. I'm sorry to say, to my regret, I am obliged to declare that North Vietnam never did withdraw its foreign troops, and that North Vietnam has continued to use the territory of Laos to go from north to south by what we call the Ho Chi Minh Trail. That is why, at this hour, my country still finds itself at war. Because, due to the fact that North Vietnam needs this passage across Laos, there has not been any political unification.
Behind the words is the harsh reality of the forgotten war. In the mountains of northern Laos, this is what the front line looks like. And this is what supports our side of that very lonely war. The only way to supply the isolated, often surrounded guerrilla camps is by plane. This is an Air America Caribou bringing ammunition, medicine, food, refugees, and wounded into Sam Thong, a base camp only a few hours' march from the nearest North Vietnamese battalion. The Mayos, largest of the Laotian hill tribes, hold Sam Thong, do the bulk of the fighting, and suffer the most. But this is still an American war, fought with American weapons, financed by American dollars, and supported by American planes. Unlike the North Vietnamese, the United States withdrew its military advisors from Laos in 1962, in accordance with the Geneva Agreements. As a result, the major burden of the war has fallen on American civilians. The plane belongs to Air America, operating under a civilian contract to the U.S. government. They fly in and out of 100 dirt strips. But still, as one pilot put it, the only thing worse than flying in this country is trying to land. Nobody will tell you just how much the war is costing America, but just to keep Air America and similar companies flying cost the United States a reported $10 million a year. Air America operates about 50 aircraft ranging from twin-engine transports to light planes and helicopters. The war and the people depend totally on them. The pilots, mostly veteran bush pilots, earn up to $3,000 a month, and between monsoons, mountains, and North Vietnamese anti-aircraft guns, earn every cent of it. Air America refuses to comment on the number of aircraft losses in over 5 years of operation. But as a pilot said, on a clear day, which is damn seldom, you can see our planes lying all over these mountains. Here in northern Laos, the friendly Mayo guerrillas hold the mountaintops, but the surrounding valleys are controlled by the communists. Air America is their only link. If it can't be moved by plane, it doesn't move. They carry everything from fresh eggs to the seriously wounded. Next to the quagmire they call a runway at Sam Thong is a 130-bed hospital which the U.S. built and helps operate. This is the first hospital these Mayos ever had. Over half the patients are combat casualties, many from communist landmines. USAID medical facilities treated over 13,000 combat casualties in Laos last year, and that, they say, is only a fraction of the total. Many casualties don't make it to the hospital. Nursing services are scarce, so this Mayo woman stays with her husband. He was wounded by a communist machine gun during a guerrilla raid. Supervising the hospital is a Laotian surgeon, one of the few in the country. He is assisted by an American USAID surgeon, Dr. Robert Jackson. He tells us about his newest patient.
He had his arm by his side, went through the arm and into the chest, hit the rib, and came back out. He was fortunate in that the bone was not hit. It was a through and through flesh wound. No broken bone here.
Most of the sick and wounded at Sam Thong are flown in. Once there, they have a good chance, provided they get there in time. But the enemy, the weather, and a shortage of airplanes all too often makes this impossible, and so they die. These are the bitter realities of the conference table neutrality in Laos. But the war goes on, advised and assisted by American civilians hopping from one mountaintop to another in light planes. The plane and the pilot are from Air America. The passenger is Jack Williamson, a U.S. aid advisor and veteran of 5 years of this mountain war. He and 5 other Americans try and coordinate U.S. help to nearly 100,000 Mao tribesmen fighting the communists in Laos. He is on his way to a guerrilla outpost deep in enemy territory. They fly near the lush Plain of Jars, a communist stronghold. To avoid its anti-aircraft batteries, they duck through clouds and valleys at treetop level. This is Williamson's objective, a hilltop surrounded by the enemy. It has no name, only a number. 1,800 Maos, driven from their traditional homeland by the communists, try to survive here. The skateboards are made from the rollers off airdrop supply cases. They do not know what peace is. Shelters from communist mortar and artillery fire are handily located. It is a village caused by and literally built from the war. The Mao defend themselves with a collection of hand-me-down U.S. weapons, World War II rifles, machine guns, and mortars. The ammunition is flown in by Air America, and as the ammunition is used up, construction in the village increases proportionately.
American out of JFK. This was one of Air America's major operations centers until the enemy overran it. The combination of danger, superb flying, and exotic locale, plus a tradition of secrecy, has led to some highly sensational reporting about Air America. Its pilots have been called America's Flying Foreign Legion and the Lord Jims of Laos.
What is Air America?
Well, it's the same thing today that it always has been, and that is a charter air carrier whose major customer is the United States government. And it's nothing more or less than that. The average age, by the way, is 43 out here, so that they're not a bunch of apple-cheeked youngsters who are looking for big thrills. Most of them have already had their thrills.
Each season, it gets worse. As an example, we're within 15 minutes now of an area. Last year was like a rest center. This year, as you know, we've already had one airplane shot down. What's the worst thing about flying out here? The mountains, the weather, or the bad guys? It's a combination of all three. We have 3 distinct flying seasons. It's either smoky, windy, or rainy. And any one of the 3 combined with the enemy creates the situation that none of us like.
So you don't really have a happy season?
There's not.
How long do you plan to keep this up?
Each year I say it's my last one. This is my 7th year now.
What is it that brings you back?
Money. No, not really. It's a big influence, of course. I have 2 daughters to put through school yet, out of my 6. So even though I'm retired, I still have to work.
You like the guys you work with?
Yeah, a real bunch of pros, every one of them.
We have an extreme sense of comradeship and a sense of competition that I think is not excelled in any profession.
Let's say the U.S. government put, let's say, 500,000 troops into North Vietnam to accomplish the same job that we're accomplishing here with a handful of, so to speak, American professionals?
We have a commodity to sell. We can't sell it any place in the world except right here.
And if you want to be, if you just want to be mundane and about it, take this war away, or if we quit, you talk about why we do it. If most of us went back to the United States, we would be a dirty old man.
Come on, Jim, you're a dirty old man here. What are you talking about?
Well, not really.
It is a different operation, I think, than you'll find any place in the world. But on the other hand, as far as professional standards go, we do meet the requirements of any major airline, regardless of where it is throughout the world.
It is becoming tougher, but it hasn't reached the point where we're giving up by any stretch of the imagination. All of us are very talented, very, very talented, and we can avoid what they have given us so far. But it is becoming a little more difficult for us to do.
We are really most all highly experienced, qualified people, and we've gone through this thing before, and it's thrill.
It's a business. It is not a romantic devil-may-care operation. We carry a lot of wounded people, and if we weren't there to carry them, they'd die. And about the time you participated in some of these uplifts of seriously wounded men, you get the feeling that there's a reason for being here. We move refugees by the thousands, and this again is a very heartwarming experience for a pilot and those of us on the ground, because if we didn't move them, they'd be overrun and made prisoners and made bearers by the opposition. We carry rice, we carry food to the people, medical supplies.
Rice is dropped in 80-pound sacks. Nearly 1/4 of the country's population are displaced persons. Most have fled the communists. Some have fled our bombing of the communists. 250,000 people are outright refugees, existing on American handouts. Over 100,000 depend on aerial delivery for survival. Supervising the relief program is a handful of American AID men. They spend most of their time in remote locations like this. It's a measure of the loyalty of the hill tribes that in 10 years of wandering unarmed through the communist-infested mountains, not a single AID man has been betrayed to the enemy.
นี่ก็เจ้ายังมาจากเมืองมา
ยังมาได้30 มื้อได้
30 มื้อบ่
They are not CIA agents. Their job is to help refugees. But even this function is indirectly linked to the war. If enough refugees flee the enemy, the communists may be left trying to conduct a people's war without people. The aid program also runs hospitals. This one treats over 40,000 people a year. Many of them are flown in by Air America and Continental. This little girl was hit by grenade fragments in a remote village. Few Americans object to this sort of American involvement in Laos. But the General Accounting Office reports that much of the AID money Congress thought it was appropriating for civilian health care was being used for medical support of the secret army. Until recently, at least, even deceiving the United States Congress was considered a legitimate tactic of the secret war. The latest North Vietnamese offensive has already created 50,000 new refugees. Most of them are Hmong tribesmen, and for most of them, this is the third time they've been uprooted. At their last location, AID had provided them with homes, schools, and a dispensary. Now they're back to square one, huddled on a bleak hilltop, sheltered by parachutes and scrap lumber. They are both tired of the war and nervous about a peace settlement that would abandon them. In the meantime, they depend on the charter planes for everything. And for the pilots of those planes, landing strips like this are becoming riskier every day.
Has this increase in enemy activity and the loss of real estate, has this affected the morale of the pilots?
No, I think it's probably made them more cautious. It can ruin your whole day if you land at somebody else's airstrip, or one that you think is friendly, and you find out it isn't the hard way.
That very thing recently happened to one Air America pilot. His wrecked aircraft still sits like a squashed bug on the enemy-held airstrip.
People on the airplane talked to people on the ground, and they said everything's secure, so I landed. The fellow I had with me, known to me as Swamp Rat, suggested I shut the engines down, so I turned the engine off. And this was one of the first mistakes I made that day. The minute that the prop stopped turning, they started shooting at us. The first one put holes in the machine, and the Swamp Rat was already outside the airplane, and he hollered at me, let's go, and this didn't take a lot of encouragement. Since the airplane was done, it was unwound, well, I leaped out of it too, and I still, though, was laboring under the illusion that when it's all over, I'm going to get back in my machine and fly out of there. This is what aviators do. They don't walk, they fly.
2 days after losing his plane and nearly losing his life, Jim Russell was flying again. The first battle of Longchen was reaching its climax, and only the performance of the charter planes enabled the secret army to turn almost certain defeat into at least a temporary standoff. Only helicopters could land to pluck out the seriously wounded. North Vietnamese artillery was shelling the airstrip. Enemy snipers were firing up at the planes. Enemy machine guns on the hills were firing down at the planes. But the friendlies were out of water and ammunition, so the planes went in anyway. They shared the narrow airspace with fighter bombers, trying to blast the enemy off the ridge lines. To the charter pilots, it was just another mission.
It goes in spurts. Last February, for example, when we didn't have so much heavy anti-aircraft, we had 27 airplanes hit in 1 month.
27 airplanes hit in 1 month?
Yes. This December, when the flak was more intense, we had 24 airplanes hit. However, the hits can be more serious because you're dealing with a larger caliber of weapon.
But that is part of the challenge, that is part of why we are here. And it's not a death wish by any stretch of the imagination. It is a little competition with the other side, huh? And try to survive. And use my talents against their talents, and usually win.
Who's complaining, God blimey? Sorry about that. You got it. No bloody fair.
The favorite watering spot for the oddball warriors of this oddball war is the Purple Porpoise Bar. The clientele includes spooks, military attachés, pilots, and diplomats.
There is a better way, you silly sod.
The pub keeper is a misplaced Englishman who calls himself Monty Banks. He gives away nearly as much booze as he sells, and to make sure his clients can discuss their clandestine business in private, he frequently places his saloon off limits to journalists.
I'll woo you every night, dear, and I'll woo you every day. I'll be your regular daddy if you put that gun away. Oh, lay that pistol down, lay that pistol down. Pistol packing, mama, lay that pistol down.
How do you cut the barkeep off?
Make him drink his own liquor. You? Me? The Americans that are in this town are the best Americans I've yet met. The people that walk into my bar, the Americans, collectively, are human beings who love humanity.
Thank you, honey.
Happy baby!
Legend has it that whenever the city of Vientiane was threatened by invaders, the monks of this temple would pray and beat the sacred drum to summon forth a dragon which protected the city. Today, the very existence of Laos is threatened, but there is no dragon to help. Even in the best of times, Laos is a fragile country. The only unifying force is allegiance to the king. Even the communists pay lip service to the throne. But that doesn't keep them from shelling the royal capital. After nearly $1 billion in American military assistance, the Lao Regular Army still leaves a lot to be desired. It does not fight well, but it has been fighting a long time. Over 1/3 of these military academy cadets are children of men killed in action. For the most part, the children of the rich and powerful don't have to worry about the army. They don't seem to worry much about the war either. Millions of dollars in American aid have helped make Vientiane a swinging town.
You'll be waiting here to make it right. You know, to make it right.
Usually, only those without money or political connections end up in the army. They are poorly paid and usually poorly led. They have little motivation. Many units have become expert at avoiding confrontations with the enemy. The main military factor in staving off the collapse of what is left of Laos is a massive bombing campaign. It involves Navy and Air Force jets, including B-52s, as well as the U.S.-supported Royal Lao Air Force. Most of the strikes in Laos are directed by American Air Force officers called FACs, or Forward Air Controllers. Accompanied by a Laotian observer, they cruise over enemy territory in a light plane, armed only with smoke rockets. Their task is to locate and mark the targets for the bombers. It's probably the most dangerous job in Laos. No one in Washington or Vientiane will say just how many bombs are being dropped or exactly where. But the facts say civilian targets are avoided.
We're reasonably sure that 100% of it's on military targets. We have a system of assurances. We carry a Laotian to talk to Laotians that don't speak English, and they verify our targets. There are certain places that are just obviously unfriendly, and any of the targets, trucks, boats, supplies that we find are military targets. And such targets where civilians may live, like villages or hooches somewhere, well, we stay strictly away from these.
Well, the North Vietnamese are pretty smart people. Knowing you're trying to avoid civilian targets, they concentrate their supply effort in a civilian-type area. What happens then?
Okay, well, of course, they've got that one system, and they use it all the time. They put supplies in villages, and we can't hit it. And of course, the Laotians fly the Laotian airplanes, and there are occasions where if they deem the target is important enough, then Laotians, strictly Laotians with Americans, no American involvement whatsoever, hit targets that they consider to be of vital importance.
The Royal Lao Air Force is an American-created byproduct of the secret war. It's trained, equipped, and advised by Americans. And in a country where fighting spirit is hard to find, the Air Force has become an elite force. The pride of the Air Force are these fighter-bomber pilots. Actually, their fighter bombers are T-28s, originally built as trainers during the Korean War. But they are rugged, easy to maintain, and carry a surprisingly large load of bombs, rockets, and napalm. With 40 T-28s, the Lao Air Force flies up to 4,000 missions a month. The pilots quickly become veterans. They are paid about $55 a month, plus a bonus of $1.60 per combat mission. By any standard, their losses have been heavy. The sons of 2 Laotian cabinet ministers are among the pilots who have been killed. This year's enemy offensive has put new strains on the Air Force. There are more missions and more enemy anti-aircraft guns. For the pilots we flew with recently, it was the 5th mission of the day. Except for a short lunch break, they had already spent 7 hours in their cockpits.
One of the things the ICC would like to investigate is Air America. It wrote to Prime Minister Savanafuma 2 years ago asking permission to do so, but has never gotten a reply. In the meantime, the ICC has gotten so hard up for cash that it's leased one of its helicopters to Air America. And Air America needs all of them it can get for its battlefield support activities of the anti-communist forces in Laos. Neutrality in Laos makes for some weird plot turns. When the Canadian delegate suggested an investigation of the Ho Chi Minh Trail, the Polish delegate said, everybody knows there's a Ho Chi Minh Trail. Why should we bother investigating it? And so it goes in Laos. The job of this American colonel is to keep the neutralist troops supplied, functioning, and most important, fighting. That's the same job our military advisors have in Vietnam. But here, for the sake of protocol, they are called military attachés of the American embassy.
The Commission has been doing, is always anxious to do whatever it can to, but it has its limitations. Thank you.
A spectacular example of its limitations is the daily slugging match of artillery along the plain of Jars between the guns of the communist North Vietnamese and the Laotians. This pile of artillery shell canisters represents the output of a single howitzer battery observing 2 weeks of Laotian-style neutrality.
A day might come when we might be able to make a more effective contribution to the maintenance of peace and sovereignty and integrity, maintenance of peace in this part of the world.
You're right on target, right on target.
strike looks like a cache of arms or some kind of munitions. You can tell by the secondary explosions and all the smoke coming up through the jungles. You can see the napalm hit and explode in those trees.
of preserving the unity, neutrality, sovereignty, and independence of this country. And we have to take solace from what Milton said, they also serve who only wait and watch.
This is a wound of entrance, where the bullet went in the leg. The wound of entrance is always small, and this is the wound of exit in the thigh.
So you will agree that this is not a very healthy or a satisfactory state of affairs, and I, as Secretary General for this commission, have many anxious moments on this account.
Despite the anxious moments of an entire world, the battle for Asia, from Vietnam seen here to Laos and more recently to Thailand, gets nothing but bigger. Its reality is hidden behind words, myths, and hopes. All sides fighting in Asia are signatories to various treaties and peace agreements prohibiting war. All sides insist they want peace. Perhaps that's why they're fighting so hard. Technically speaking, the war is illegal. Hostilities are technically prevented by the International Control Commission. The United Nations is also supposed to peacefully resolve differences. Each country loudly proclaims its desire for neutrality, yet a decade of aggression has violated everyone's neutrality and freedom. Repugnant as it is, force has been the sole reality in Asia. And the only really valid question seems to be this: are we, the United States, willing or able to fight communist aggression to a standstill on the mainland of Asia? One of the gunners in this armored column appears to have answered the question. He said, "We're going to make these damn people free whether they like it or not." Ted Yates, NBC News, reporting. When the communists overrun these villages, they like nothing better than to add a U.S. plane to their war trophies. Landing facilities at the guerrilla camps in northern Laos aren't much. They are so bad, in fact, that a new kind of aircraft called STOL, for short takeoff or landing, have to be used. This turboprop creation is a Pilatus Porter. It will lug 2 people and a ton payload over the mountains at 174 miles an hour, land in 150 feet, and take off in 300. With a 35-mile headwind, it gets off in 20 feet. And like the unconventional Pilatus Porter, the war in Laos has developed a new breed of frontline American advisor. Jack Williamson here is the example. Although a civilian, his main job is to keep the Mayo able to fight the communists. To do this, he spends much of his time behind enemy lines, is shot at often, has contracted malaria, hepatitis, and dengue fever. He's also learned to live with the Mayos, speak their language, and earn their loyalty. So effective is his work, the communists have placed a $25,000 reward on his life. Williamson's only fear, however, is that the United States will grow weary of the war and abandon our Mayo allies to the communist invaders. Here he asks the guerrillas why they fight.
I asked him, why don't they like the communists? He says because, one, when the
when the communists come, they force the men to be bearers for the Vietnamese soldiers. They must carry their rice, they must carry their ammunition. They don't like this. Second, they take all their women, and their women are passed among the soldiers, the Vietnamese soldiers, and they don't like this. And two, they take their children and send them to school, and they never see them again, and they obviously don't like this. And there's a lot of other things that kept going on, but this is basically that they don't like the Vietnamese coming in and taking over. Totally committed. And since they made this commitment, they'll be totally annihilated if the help isn't given. There's no question about it. The Vietnamese is to completely annihilate these people, because it's the only real resistance they've met out here in this, as far as this country is concerned.
In Laos, the Mao guerrillas are doing to the communists what the Viet Cong are doing to us in Vietnam. Their hit-and-run ambush tactics against invading Vietnamese units in Laos are not only militarily effective, but have forced the so-called communist liberators into the embarrassing position of fighting a counterinsurgency war. But the war has driven the Maos from their farms, and they are hungry. So the biggest part of Jack Williamson's job and U.S. aid is just to keep them eating. The rice is from Thailand. The coolies are Chinese. The money for it all comes from America, and the job is huge. To keep just 130,000 tribesmen fed and fighting takes over 20,000 tons of rice a year, plus wheat, corn, and oil. All this cost the United States over $5.5 million. These coolies manhandle 50 tons of rice a day. What they are doing is rebagging rice into 80-pound loads for airdrops. Each bag is double strength and hand-stitched shut, so it's not as apt to burst on impact from the airdrop. All in all, about 250,000 Laotians have been driven from their homes by the war, about 10% of the total population, and we're helping to feed most of them too. But the Mao rice lift is our biggest single operation. From this warehouse in Vientiane, the bags are trucked to the airport and loaded on Air America transport planes. 2 years ago, Air America rice planes had the skies over Laos pretty much to themselves.
Lima 36, Jolly Green 56. Calling Jolly Green 56, say again.
This is Hotel 22. I don't think there's anyone up on the radio at 36.
Today, the radio channels are full of American voices involved in our air war against North Vietnam and communist supply routes in the south. But this mission is to drop rice, not bombs. The target is the nameless Mao camp, where Jack Williamson has learned the rice supply is exhausted.
36, Jolly Green 56.
750 is car ferry inbound, going to Tower. We'll have 1,200 pounds on board.
The problem now is whether or not the pilots can find the camp. The solution seems to be to bank through the clouds for a closer look, and in the process, avoid hitting a mountain or enemy anti-aircraft fire. It's all rather risky in a lumbering World War II transport loaded down with 4.5 tons of rice. Through the broken monsoon storms, somehow the pilots get their bearings and grope their way toward the drop zone. In the rear of the plane, the cargo handlers have donned their wind masks. These men are called kickers because they literally kick the cargo out. The sound of the engine brings everybody, even the pigs, scampering to the drop zone. This plane is the difference between life and death to everyone, pigs included. Its arrival means more to these people than Christmas. The pilots rely on Kentucky windage for aiming the rice drop. When they ring the bell, it means push, and out goes the first 18 bags of rice, the most basic weapon in the old and forgotten war in Laos. Air America pilots have become expert in this kind of sharpshooting. From 1,000 feet, they can generally put 90% of the bags into an area the size of a tennis court. molasses, the plane drops 108 sacks. This amounts to a 10-day supply for the 3 companies of guerrilla troops who hold this outpost and their families. Because of bad weather, this drop was nearly a week late. The U.S. aid program in Laos is not perfect, but it has come a long way from the early days when much of our money went to finance the import of Scotch whiskey and luxury automobiles for the politicians and generals back in the capital. Neutral Laos has a more formal war. These young Royal Lao Air Force pilots are part of it. After a day of combat missions, many supplementing American airstrikes on communist supply routes in Laos, they relax a bit. Their pay is $12 a month. There is no flight pay, and their tour of duty is for the duration of a war that has no end in sight. Their support is all from the United States Air Force, but like the rest of our military aid in Laos, it is given discreetly. The legitimate government of Laos has asked our help, thus our participation in the war is legal. But the pretense of Laotian neutrality is the price Prime Minister Savanaphouma extracts from us in exchange for letting us help fight his war in Laos, as well as letting us use Laos to help fight our war in Vietnam. The masquerade of neutrality is based on Savanaphuma's reluctance to be labeled an American puppet, and his hope that genuine neutrality may come to Laos when the armed communists in his country have been forcefully driven out. Whatever may or may not happen in Laos, today and for the last 12 years, it's the same long war.
Hello, Yates. Do you read 976?
This is Yates. The Royal Lao Air Force has 24 of these C-28 fighter bombers in action. When the weather permits, they fly 7 days a week, supporting ground troops and shooting up North Vietnamese supply lines into South Vietnam along the Ho Chi Minh and Sihanouk trails, both of which run through Laos. Target. That's the impersonal way of saying we're looking for someone to kill or something to destroy. Trucks, oil depots, rice stores, bridges, anything useful to the enemy fighting in South Vietnam. We are flying towards the junction of the Ho Chi Minh and Sihanouk Trail in southern Laos. To our front is Cambodia, to our left, Vietnam. We are armed with 750-pound bombs, rockets, napalm, and 50 caliber machine guns. Quite a load for a Korean War vintage training plane. Much of the pilot training here is strictly on the job. These pilots range in age from 19 to 34, many have been flying combat missions like this for 6 years. They go to war every morning as routinely as an American man goes to his office. About 8,000 feet below us is the famous Ho Chi Minh Trail. From here it doesn't look like much, but in fact it's quite an engineering feat to hack a road through these mountainous jungles. It still is one of the principal supply routes of the North Vietnamese into South Vietnam. From here it's a small red ribbon winding down these valleys. The reason we're not flying lower and closer is because of anti-aircraft positions defending the road. If you look closely, you can see where the trail has been bombed. See some bomb craters. The trail has been mostly hand-built, and you can see by the enormous cuts that have been made in the face of these cliffs the tremendous amount of work that's gone on here in 2 years. The reason the foliage on each side of the trail looks brown and dead is because it's been defoliated to make the target clear for the T-28 pilots.
Meanwhile, back in the capital of Laos, the elaborate charade of maintaining neutrality is acted out. The plane belongs to the CIC, Commission Internationale du Contrôle. In English, the International Control Commission, or ICC. Gathered to see it off to Saigon in Cambodia with its cargo of vacationers and mail are members of its 3 delegations, Indians, Canadians, and Poles. Its budget in Laos is $2.2 million annually. Its job is to see to it no one violates Laos's neutrality. Since the ICC can only investigate breaches of neutrality at someone's request and by mutual agreement of the delegation, and since this seldom happens, it devotes itself to trivia. It is also going broke. China and North Vietnam quit paying their agreed-to shares back in 1963. So some of its facilities look a bit shabby. The Indians use this building beside the Mekong River. The Poles live outside town, where several of them have become expert orchid growers. The Indians, accustomed to the heat, are more athletic. They are also intensely proud of their postal service, boasting that a letter addressed to APO 56 New Delhi gets to Laos quicker than by any other means. The problem is there's seldom any official mail about the war they are supposed to control. So all the efficiency merely ensures record delivery of personal mail. They have their own wireless network, too. On the circuit are its delegations in Hanoi and Saigon, who are also responsible for maintaining peace in Southeast Asia. The wireless was installed so the Commission could react promptly and effectively in case of emergency, such as any outright violations of neutrality of Laos by the Vietnamese, Americans, or anyone else. Most of the Commission's paperwork involves its unpaid bills. But on the few recent occasions that the Commission, with the Poles always abstaining, have actually made investigations, the reports have run up to 700 pages. They are sent to the co-chairman of the Geneva Agreement, Britain and the Soviet Union, and that's the last of them. Besides its own airline, which sells tickets to anyone to help pay for the gas, the ICC has its own inspection helicopters, furnished by the United States, which take about 30% of the Commission's annual budget, even though they don't inspect anything. Once, several years ago, the ICC tried to stop a communist offensive by helicoptering an observer team into its path. The communists kept right on coming, and the ICC barely got out with their lives. Since then, they stay parked. Impotent it is, but the ICC has many dedicated people who would like to do their job. Residing at this comfortable Vientiane mansion is the Indian chairman of the ICC. But his efforts are frustrated by rules of procedure, as well as having all meaningful activities of the ICC boycotted by the communist-aligned Polish delegation. His name is Girdhari Lalpuri, career diplomat. With him, his daughter.
The International Commission for Supervision and Control, which, as you know, consists of Canada, India and Poland, with India as the chairman of the commission, supervises that as laid down under the protocol, no foreign troops, foreign instructors, foreign equipment, military equipment comes into this country. That no signatory to the agreement violates the agreement by imposing a military agreement upon this country, or using this country as a base for military operations, or doing anything which may infringe against the sovereignty of this country or against its neutrality. And all the efforts of the Commission are geared to see that this country remains sovereign, independent, and united.
Do you read me? This is Yates. Below us now is the Sihanouk Trail. It looks much less developed than the Ho Chi Minh Trail, but nonetheless it too is a principal supply route into South Vietnam for the communist forces. Here again you can see on each side of it the brown, dead-looking trees, the result of defoliation efforts to make the trail a little clearer for the bombing missions. It's very difficult to locate targets on the trail because of weather, and also because the enemy has learned at the first sound of an airplane engine to hide and camouflage their vehicles and themselves. These roads and supply routes have all been built by hand, very often conscripted labor, people taken from the little villages and forced to work on these emergency supply roads.
Under the present conditions, unfortunately, the Commission is not free to operate in each and every part of the country. And therefore, in actual functioning, its functions are very much limited. Nevertheless, I do feel that by its very existence, it is keeping the hope alive that the country is committed to those ideals that, as I said, of unity, sovereignty, neutrality, and integrity. And to that extent, I think we have the goodwill of all the signatory powers.
They had already spent 7 hours in their cockpits. There were 5 strike planes on the mission, all of them loaded with a complete assortment of lethal ordnance. I flew in the back seat of a strike plane. NBC News cameraman Charles Feckety flew in the American-piloted fact plane, which was pinpointing the target for the strikes.
We've just had the target marked here, and now we're going to try to go in and clobber it.
The target was a Laotian army outpost that had been overrun the night before.
Completed our first pass. We're going around again now.
After a day's flying, there is happy hour, often a mixture of American whiskey and loud dancing. One pilot told me the whiskey helps him forget the 12.7s. He was referring to the 12.7 millimeter heavy machine guns, which are one of the communists' favorite and most deadly anti-aircraft weapons.
that thought always exists in the back of your mind. Now, you never know, of course, when somebody's going to pull in a 12-7. Whenever I go into a new area, I'm always careful to at least stay above the effective range of a 12-7. And then today it was particularly true that I had no idea what to expect because the friendlies had reported trucks moving in the area, and they could have been bringing in anything. So I started out in the area fairly high. But they don't have a tendency to shoot at facts so much unless they're reasonably sure that they can get them. Once they give away their position, then we call in too many airstrikes. And so they generally stay away until they're sure they can either get a FAC or else they can get the strike aircraft.
The forward air controllers have become a special breed. Their uniform usually consists of blue jeans, camouflage survival vest, and a Colt revolver. They are mostly captains and lieutenants in their early 20s. They're proud of their work. This one, George Towsley, graduated from the Air Force Academy in 1969. Before that, he was an Eagle Scout.
How long do you normally stay out on one of these missions?
Well, we can go for about 3 hours with the fuel we have, and we can stretch it to 3.5 mission. 4 hours about very most this airplane can go, and that leaves us no reserve, so about 3.5.
Will you be relieved by somebody else then, or?
No, I'm taking off now, and I'll go to about 5 o'clock, and then I start going back home, and that'll be it for the day. We just fly in the daytime.
Good luck.
Thank you, sir.
6 weeks ago, George Towsley's luck ran out. He was killed over Laos. No one knows how many Americans have died there. That part of the secret war is still secret.